And welcome to Technology Tap. I'm Professor J. Rod. In this episode, we're going to continue our discussion on different types of Windows and how to install it. Let's tap in. All right, welcome to Technology Tap, when we talk about all three CompTIA exams, A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus. My name is Professor J. Rod. I'm a professor of cybersecurity, and I love helping my students pass these exams. I'm also the author of Scam Proof for Seniors. It's available on Amazon and my website, ProfessorJRod, that's JROD.com/books. If you want to help your parents or grandparents, help them and to prevent them from getting scammed, it'll make a great Mother's Day gift, which is coming up next month. So if you want that, you just look for it on Amazon or ProfessorJRod.com/books. All right, let's continue where we left off last time. Last time we talked about Windows, the different versions of Windows. And today we're going to talk about installation strategy, right? Clean install versus upgrade. Right, so let me paint you a picture, right? A user walks into your office, laptop in hand, and they say, my computer is slow, can you fix it? It's a simple request, right? Common, very common. So here's where everything changes, right? It's not what you do, but in what you decide. Every OS installation comes down to two choices, either clean install or in-place upgrade. And this is one of the most important decisions when you're installing, when somebody hands you a laptop on what you're going to do. Why does it matter? Because the wrong choice doesn't just fail, it compounds problems. It carries them forward. It buries them deeper into the system. So a clean install, right? It's like the reset button for real problems, right? What is a clean install? Clean install means wiping the drive, removing the existing operating system, and installing a fresh copy. No history, no leftover files, no hidden issues. So think of it as this. So your house has electrical issues, plumbing problems, and structural cracks. You can patch everything, or you can tear it down and rebuild it properly. So a clean install is rebuilding it from the foundation. Let's look at the advantage of having a clean install. It removes corruption, it eliminates malware, it improves performance, and creates a stable system. So let's say you have a user who comes to you and they say their system is slow, it has pop-ups everywhere, and random crashes. They ask you, can you just upgrade it? If you do an in-place upgrade, you're bringing all that garbage with you. But if you do a clean install, you eliminate the problem entirely. So here's a rule that you can write down. If the system is unstable, infected, or corrupted, always do a clean install. But here's the trade-off of doing a clean install. You must back up the data. You must reinstall applications, and you must reconfigure settings. But to be honest, it's a little bit easier to reinstall the apps because a lot of them are cloud-based, right? So you don't really have to, or there's very minimal of installing, right? Office 365. A lot of it is in the cloud. You only have to install very little of it. So when your user asks you, why can't you just fix it without deleting anything, right? And this is when you have to explain to them, we can fix the symptoms, but we can't eliminate the root cause. All right, let's talk about the in-place upgrade. The in-place upgrade means running setup from within the OS keeping the files, keeping the apps, and keeping the settings. So let's go back to that house example again, right? Instead of tearing down the house, you renovate it. You paint over the walls, you replace some parts, and you keep the structure. The advantage is faster, less disruption, and no need to reinstall everything, right? So company system is running just fine. It just needs Windows 11. You do an in-place upgrade, right? It makes sense because there are no major issues that you're having, right? So somebody comes to you and they say, with a laptop that's running fine and you want to do an upgrade, right? An in-place upgrade makes sense because it doesn't have any major issues, no corruption, and no instability. But here's the hidden risk. This is what beginners don't realize. You're preserving everything. That includes misconfigurations, old drivers, registry history, and problems that you don't even know about, hidden problems. So here's another rule that you can write down. If the system is healthy, then you can upgrade. If the system is questionable, then clean install. Right? So this is, before, how do you make the decision, right? Before, this is where you're going to elevate yourself from student to technician. Ask these questions before installing anything. What is the current system state? Is it stable? If it's stable, then you upgrade. If it's unstable, clean install. Is the data critical? If it's yes, then back up first. If it's no, clean install, right? Is there a time constraint? Do they need it fast? If they need it fast, upgrade might be the best solution for you. If they can wait a little bit, then do the clean install. Are there hidden issues, malware, corruptions, driver conflicts? If yes, then it's clean install. CompTIA questions will describe a scenario like this, right? A user system is slow, corrupted, and infected. You see that, you know that you have to do a clean install. So, all right, let's go in deeper because this is what we do as technicians, right? We don't rush into installations. We prepare. So you have to verify a couple of things. You have to verify CPU support, that you meet the RAM requirements, that you have trusted platform module 2.0, secure boot, and storage capacity. You start an upgrade, and halfway through it, and you realize you don't meet the requirements, the installation fails, right? It could be because of unsupported CPU. So here's another rule you can write down. Never install blind. Always verify before you do it. Right? Driver support. Even if the OS installs, if the drivers are missing, you may get no Wi-Fi, no audio, no graphics. Right? User says, my internet doesn't work after you upgraded because you don't have any network drivers. So you got to make sure that the drivers are updated too. Always download the drivers beforehand and store them externally. Well, now this is one that we're going to talk about that CompTIA likes you to do on the exam, and they really stress it in the exam. And for the exam, for the sake of the exam, yes, you say yes, I'm going to do this. But in reality, if you do this all the time, you're never going to have a job, right? They're going to fire you, which is backup, right? This CompTIA says it's not optional, it's not recommended, it's mandatory. But you cannot, CompTIA wants you to back up any and everything before you touch it. And you can't do that. Realistically, you cannot do that because you're not going to have a job, right? People are waiting for their computers and you're there fussing around with it. So I don't recommend you doing that, right? But for the purpose of the exam, you back up everything, right? But in reality, you don't really want to do that. All right, so you install the OS, something fails, the data's gone, and the user says, did you back up my files? And you say no. That could be a problem. But again, it depends, right, on what the situation. So, and again, CompTIA's point is if the data exists, then you back it up always. But we all know that realistically, that might not be the best case. All because of, time, right? They don't want, you're going to spend most of your time backing up. If every computer that you touch, you got to back it up first before you touch it. So, All right, application and software check. So you want to check the applications are compatible, the software requirements are good, and the licensing. A company upgrades OS, their accounting software stops working. Now, business stops. So now you have to make sure before you upgrade that the important software that they're using works, right? So maybe you don't want to update the whole accounting department, right? You just do one. Always ask what applications does this system depend on, right? Next, we want to ensure that there is enough disk space and proper partition layout, right? Because if you're running out of space in the middle of installation, that is no bueno, and that's on you because you did not have proper planning. So, and then we have to continuously install, right, with our updates, right? Windows 11 does annual updates, right? Installation is not a one-time event. It's ongoing. Every update is a mini installation process, and it can improve performance or it can break the system and introduce new bugs. So you got to be careful, all right? Test it before you do any kind of upgrade, right? Virtually, or you just have a test machine that you can use it on, right? So let's bring it all together. So the user systems, slow, malware infected, outdated drivers, we do it, and the technician decides to do an in-place upgrade. The result is the malware is going to remain, the performance is still poor, and the issues persist, and the user is going to come back to you and say you didn't fix anything. What should really happen? Clean install, right? So let's lock this in, right? So clean install equals fresh start. In-place upgrade equals preserving the systems. Always check compatibility. Always back up data. Again, that's for CompTIA purposes only, for the exam purpose only. And always plan before installation, right? Stop asking what's faster and start asking what's correct, what's stable, and what solves the root problem. A bad installation system can follow systems for a while, and a good one solves problems before they even begin. Right? So before we get into the final layer, right, we have to break down, we're going to discuss boot device, disk partitioning, deployment methods, and repair. This is where installation becomes a controlled process, right? Everything we talked about so far is choosing the right edition, understanding the architecture, and deciding clean versus upgrade. That was all thinking work. Now we get part where technicians are truly tested, is the execution. Because here's the truth. You can make all the right decisions, but if you execute them wrong, the system is going to fail. Before an OS installs, the system has to start from somewhere. That's the boot process, right? A boot process, your system can boot from the following places: USB drives, optical drives, the network, Pixie boot, internal drive partitions, or internet-based boot. So think of it like a building. The boot device is the door you can enter through. If you choose the wrong door, you'll never get inside. Today, USB is king. Why? It's faster than DVDs, portable, reusable, and works on modern systems. If you plug in, so let's say you plug in a USB installer, you restart the system and nothing happens. Why? Because the boot order is wrong, right? Always check. This should be something that you should write down. Always check BIOS UEFI boot order. Modern systems use UEFI. Older systems use legacy BIOS. Why this matters? Because GPT requires UEFI and MBR works with legacy. If mismatched, installation fails. Now we're at one of the most important topics is MBR versus GPT. MBR stands for Master Boot Record, the maximum size that you can have on your hard drive is 2 terabytes. Max partitions are 4 primary, and it's an older standard. GPT, GUID partition table, supports large drives, many partitions, modern standard, and required for UEFI. NBR is like a paper map, limited, outdated, and restricted. And GPT is like GPS navigation, scalable, accurate, and modern. So let me give you a scenario where you fail. You install Windows on a 4 terabyte drive, but you use NBR. The result, the system will only recognize 2 terabytes. The other 2 terabytes, it's not going to recognize. Modern system, use GPT always. File systems. This is the language of your storage, right? Windows uses NTFS, New Technology File System. Why? Because it supports large files, permissions, encryptions, and reliability. The OS just doesn't just need space; it needs structural space. So, have you ever get a USB that it's more than 32 gigs, right? And you install something on it, and somebody gives you a movie file that's 6 gigs, and you try to install it on your USB drives, and it tells you don't have enough space, right? You don't have enough space on it, but you have 32 gigs. Check the file systems. Make sure it's formatted in NTFS. That's what it means by structural space, right? You think you have space, but when you try to copy something that's more than 4 gigs, it won't recognize it. Any of the other ones, right? FAT32 specifically, right? You want to make sure that your USBs are NTFS, right? And now you can right click on it, properties, and check to see if it is. If not, you can format it and format it in NTFS. All right, so now the system boots, the disk is configured, and now you install. What happens during installation? OS files are copied, the bootloader is created, and the hardware is detected, and the drivers are initialized. Where things go wrong: if the wrong partition is selected or the disk is formatted incorrectly, missing drivers, or incorrect edition chosen. Technicians install OS on the wrong partition and the user data disappears. That's a nightmare. Always verify target disk and partition before you install. All right, now we go beyond single machines, right? We talk about unintended installations used for large deployment or standardized setup. How it works: it uses answer files or scripts. So when you install Windows, it asks you like, oh, is it English? Is it in the US? Right? All that stuff. So you can actually write a script to automate it, right? User creation, settings, and configurations. You can do that. Companies need to deploy 300 computers. Manual install, impossibly inefficient, right? Unintended install, automated, consistent, and it's fast. You don't want to even when you upgrade your computers, you can do like this, right? Deployment. You don't want to do manual install. It will take you forever. If repeating the same install, you want to make sure that you automate it. Instead of a network deployment, instead of installing locally, you can install over the network. One of the benefits is centralized, is faster at scale, and no physical media is needed. Zero-touch deployment. This is the future of IT. Devices will turn on, connect to a network, and install automatically. No human interaction. So at this level, you're not installing systems, you're engineering environments. All right, let's talk about multi-boot systems. Multi-boot allows multiple OS on one machine. You could actually have Windows 10 and Windows 11 on the same machine, or Linux and Windows on the same machine. Testing, what do you want to use this for? You want to use it for testing environments, learning labs, or dual platform work. Right? Considerations: disk partitioning, bootloader configuration, and OS compatibility. Multi-boot adds flexibility, but it increases complexity. All right, because everything let's talk about repair and recovery, because eventually something will go wrong, right? You're only gonna get so lucky sometimes. So used when the system won't boot or the OS is corrupt. You can fix the system without deleting data, right? You can refresh, reinstall Windows, keep the files, and remove the apps. You can reset, delete everything, and then do a full install. Right? So, for example, my system says my system is broken, but I need my files. Your move is you can either refresh or repair the installation. I always choose the least destructive solution first. That is something that if you've listened to me for a long time, this is one of the things that CompTIA looks for. They want you to do the least destructive thing first, the easiest things first, right? Because that's the role of a technician, is not to waste time. OEM systems include recovery partitions so that you can restore the system back to the factory state that it was, but it removes custom configurations and it will remove the installed apps. So recovery partitions are fast, but they're not always ideal. So let's bring this all together. Technician uses the wrong boot mode, chooses MBR on a large drive, install wrong edition, and skips driver prep. Results: OS installs correctly, performance issues, missing features, and system instability. What went wrong? Not one mistake, but a chain of small ones. Installation success is not about one step. It's about precision across all steps. So let's lock this in. Boot device determine how installation begin. GPD is the modern standard. NTFS is required for Windows. Unintended installs enable scaling, and repair options preserve systems. So, before you install, you plan. During installation, you verify. And after installation, you validate. Most users think installing an OS is easy, but technicians know it's one of the most high impact actions in IT. So installing an operating system is not about clicking through a wizard. It's about understanding environments, making correct decisions, and executing with precision, because every installation builds a foundation. And in IT, weak foundations fail, strong foundations scale. All right. So let's get into our questions. As we know, I like asking 4 questions. So I'll ask the questions, I'll read the choices and ask again. Give you 5 seconds and then we'll do it. All right. Question 1. A technician is setting up laptops for small businesses that require centralized authentication, remote management, and disk encryption. Which Windows edition is the most appropriate? A, Windows Home, B, Windows Education, C, Windows Pro, or D, Windows N. A technician is setting up laptops for a small business that requires centralized authentication, remote management, and disk encryption. Which Windows edition is the most appropriate? A, Windows Home, B, Windows Education, C, Windows Pro, or D, Windows N. Give you 5 seconds to think about it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The correct answer is C, Windows Pro. Windows Pro includes domain join, which takes care of centralized authentication, BitLocker, disk encryption, and remote desktop, which is remote management. Now, when you see a question like this, it's asking you for those 3 things, right? Requires centralized authentication, remote management, and disk encryption. You have to pick one that does all 3, and Windows Pro does all 3. Don't choose one that has 2 because it's wrong. It has to meet all the 3 requirements in any question, right? Windows Home lacks all these features. Windows N is just a regulatory variant and it's missing the main features. And Education could work, but the standard business answer is Pro. So if you see domain plus BitLocker plus business use, think Windows Pro. All right, question number 2. A system with 16 gigs of RAM is running slowly despite no visible errors. The technician discovers the system is using a 32-bit OS. What is the most likely issue? A, the CPU is incompatible. B, the system is limited to 4 gigs of usable RAM. C, the disk is formatted incorrectly. Or D, the system requires a BIOS update. I'll read it again. A system with 16 gigs of RAM is running slowly despite no visible errors. The technician discovers the system is using a 32-bit OS. What is the most likely issue? A, the CPU is incompatible. B, the system is limited to 4 gigs of usable RAM. C, the disk is formatted incorrectly. Or D, the system requires a BIOS update. I'll give you 5 seconds to think about it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The answer is B, the system is limited to 4 gigs of usable RAM. 32-bit OS, the max is 4 gigs. The remaining RAM is ignored. So even though you have 16 installed, the system will only use 4. So anytime you see 4 gigs plus performance issue plus 32-bit, the answer is going to be the system is limited. So if anything with greater than 4 gigs plus performance issues plus 32-bit, it's going to be that anything more than 4 gigs is not using. That's why it's slow. All right, question 3. A technician needs to upgrade a system from 32-bit to 64-bit while preserving system stability. Which installation method should be used? A, in-place upgrade. B, repair installation. C, clean install. Or D, fresh installation. I'll read it again. A technician needs to upgrade a system from 32-bit OS to 64-bit OS while preserving system stability. Which installation method should be used? A, in-place upgrade. B, repair installation. C, clean install. Or D, refresh installation. And the correct answer is C. You cannot upgrade from 32 to 64 using an in-place upgrade. So that's out. Right? In-place is out. You must back up the data and perform a clean install. Right? None of these other ones will work. So if the architecture change, clean install is required. All right, last question. A technician is installing Windows on a 4 terabyte drive using a modern UEFI based system. Which partition style should be selected? A technician, A, FAT32, B, MBR, C, NTFS, or D, GPD? GPD, right? I'll read it again. A technician is installing Windows on a 4 terabyte drive using modern UEFI based system. Which partition style should be selected? A, FAT32, B, MBR, C, NTFS, or D, GPD? And the correct answer is D, GPD. MBR is limited to 2 terabytes. GPD supports large drives and requires UEFI. 4 terabyte drives must use GPD. So, if anything, large disk greater than 2 terabytes use GPD, or if it's UEFI system, that also uses GPD. So, all right, so let's take a step back because we covered a lot today, and it wasn't just about installing Windows. It was something a little bit deeper. We talked about decision making. Right? We talked about choosing the right edition, understanding the system architecture, knowing when to wipe the computer and when to upgrade, and planning before execution and installing with precision. Because here's the truth most people never learn. Computers don't fail randomly. They fail because of bad decisions. The wrong edition limits your capability. The wrong architecture kills performance. The wrong installation method carries problems forward. And poor execution breaks everything. But when you do it right, when you think like a technician, when you plan, verify, and execute, you don't just install an operating system, you build foundation. And in IT, everything depends on that foundation. So next time you sit down to install an OS, don't rush, don't click through, don't treat it like a checklist. Treat it like what it really is, a critical decision point. Because strong systems start with strong installs, right? Strong systems start with strong installs. All right. Thanks for listening. This is Professor J. Rod, and you've been listening to Technology Tap. Until next time, keep tapping into technology. This has been a presentation of Little Cha Cha Productions, art by Sarah, music by Joe Kim. We're now part of the Pod Match Network. You can follow me at TikTok at Professor J Rod, that's JROD, or you can email me at ProfessorJRod, JROD, at gmail.com.